She collapsed in the rain, and he saved her without knowing. She was the heiress whose secret had once destroyed his empire. Now, with killers closing in and a past built on lies, he must choose, walk away or protect the woman who may be the reason he lost everything. But who is really saving who? Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button. Because tomorrow, we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. Rain hammered against the black glass skyline of Manhattan, a relentless downpour that blurred neon lights and turned sidewalks into rivers. Inside a sleek black limousine crawling down Fifth Avenue, Elijah Maddox leaned his head against the window, watching the storm with distant eyes. At 35, he carried the heavy silence of a man who once ruled the corporate world and lost everything. The driver made a slow turn, tires slicing through the waterlogged street. That's when Elijah saw her. A flash of crimson against the gray world. A woman in a red dress, soaked to the skin, stumbled into the crosswalk. Her legs buckled. A car sped toward her, horn blaring. "Stop the car," Elijah barked, already throwing open the door. He dashed into the rain, ignoring the pain in his leg from an old injury that never quite healed. With seconds to spare, he reached the woman and yanked her back, just as the car screeched past. She collapsed against him. Her lips were pale, her breath short. Dark hair clung to her face like ivy. There was blood on her arm, but she held it tightly, refusing help. When he asked if she needed a hospital, she shook her head fiercely. "I'm fine," she whispered, then winced. "I just can't go there." Her voice trembled, not from the cold, but from something deeper. Fear, maybe. Trauma. Elijah studied her. There was something familiar in her eyes, but he couldn't place it. "Who is your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Lena," she finally said. "Lena Carter." He offered a hand, and after a beat, she took it. Rain slicked their clothes as he led her back to the limo. The driver raised his brow, but Elijah simply said, "Back to the penthouse." Inside the car, Lena huddled in the far seat, arms crossed, water dripping from her dress onto the leather. Elijah pulled off his jacket and passed it to her. She took it with shaking hands, whispering, "Thank you." She didn't ask where they were going. When the elevator doors opened to Elijah's penthouse, Lena blinked in disbelief. The space was a quiet fortress above the city was. Modern, minimalist, wrapped in glass. The rain outside forming rivers down the window panes. "You didn't have to bring me here," she said, voice tight. "But I wasn't about to leave you on the street." She moved carefully, clearly favoring one leg. Elijah noticed but said nothing. Instead, he grabbed a towel and handed it to her. She took it with another quiet nod and stepped cautiously into the bathroom. While she was gone, Elijah poured himself a scotch. He was still dripping wet but barely noticed. The moment her name left her lips, Lena Carter, something in his chest had shifted. It was impossible. Elijah and Leah's hat rooted itself deep inside him, that this night had just changed everything. She returned moments later, wearing a towel and his oversized dress shirt, her wet dress clutched in her arms. "Thank you," she said softly. "Again. I'll go once the rain eases." "You're not going anywhere tonight," he said calmly. "You're bleeding, and it's 3 a.m. She looked at him, and for the first time he saw the fire behind her eyes. "You don't get to decide where I go." He raised an eyebrow. "You're right, but I'll still offer you a place to rest, just for tonight." Their eyes locked. Something unspoken passed between them. A tension that wasn't just from the storm. "I noticed you're limping," she said suddenly. He glanced away. "Old injury, doesn't matter." She tilted her head. "It always matters." Elijah studied her. This wasn't just a stranger. There was steel beneath her softness, secrets behind those eyes. And something in her sadness made the silence around him feel heavier. She drifted to the window, watching the rain like she was waiting for it to end, something more than just the weather. "Storms," she murmured, "aren't just outside. Elijah stood still behind her, the low hum of the city beyond the glass filling the quiet. He didn't know what exactly had drawn him out of that car, only that something about the look in her eyes when she stumbled into the road had jolted him out of the numbness he'd lived in for years. Lena's reflection shimmered in the window. Her posture was stiff, arms crossed, like she didn't belong in the warmth she'd been offered. "Put your feet in the guest room," Elijah finally said. "Clean sheets, door locks from the inside." She turned to him, surprised. "You trust me?" "I just saved your life," he said, voice calm. "Maybe I'm hoping you won't rob me in return." A flicker of a smile touched her lips, gone as quickly as it came. "You don't talk like most rich men." He raised a brow. "How many do you know?" "Enough," she replied, looking away. "They usually want something." Elijah didn't respond to that. He moved toward the hallway and motioned, "Down there, last door." She hesitated again before walking past him. As she did, she murmured, "Thanks for not asking questions." But Elijah had plenty of them. Why was she so terrified of going to the hospital? Why did her voice tighten when she gave her name? Why did she look like a woman running from ghosts? He waited until he heard the soft click of the guest room door, then exhaled and ran a hand through his damp hair. Something about Lena Carter didn't sit right, and yet, for the first time in months, his thoughts weren't stuck in the past. They were here, now, with her. The storm continued outside, thunder echoing like old regrets. Morning came, slowly, with gray light and the quiet sound of footsteps on polished wood floors. Elijah was already awake, standing by the kitchen window in fresh clothes, stirring coffee with one hand, Kane leaning beside him. Lena walked in barefoot, still wearing the dress shirt, her hair damp from a quick shower. She looked startled to find him up. "You don't sleep much," she said, voice husky from sleep. "Didn't feel like missing this awkward breakfast," he replied dryly, handing her a cup of coffee. She took it and held it close, warming her hands. "You always rescue women in the rain?" "Only ones in red dresses who look like they've been running for miles." She sipped her coffee slowly. "I'm not used to anyone noticing." He watched her carefully. "Maybe you were just trying not to be seen." That landed hard. Lena looked down, her fingers tightening around the mug. "You don't need to understand me, Elijah." He smiled faintly. "Too late for that. I already want to." She blinked at him, caught off guard by the gentleness in his voice. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a quiet offer she didn't know how to accept. "I should go," she said, setting the mug down. "I've already stayed too long." He nodded once but didn't stop her. Instead, he said, "Take the coat. It's still raining." She looked at it on the chair, hesitating. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked. "You don't even know who I am." He didn't look away. "Because someone once told me everyone deserves shelter in a storm." She stared at him for a long moment, then slowly picked up the coat. As she slipped it on, he added quietly, "If you ever need to come back, Lena, there's no lock on that door." She gave him one last look, not a goodbye, but something heavier, a pause. Then she walked into the rain. And for the first time in years, Elijah found himself hoping she'd come back. The rain had stopped, but Lena hadn't left. Elijah told himself it was temporary, just another night until she found her footing. But by the third morning, he walked into his kitchen and found her standing barefoot by the window, sipping coffee like she'd always belonged there. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her words had weight. She noticed things. The books he'd left half read, the way his limp worsened when the weather shifted, the small winces he thought no one saw. She wasn't nosy, just aware. He began to test her, gently at first. At breakfast, he tossed out a question while scrolling through the financial page. "Did you hear about the Zolotech drop?" She looked up from her tea. They over-leveraged, got greedy with international expansion. It was bound to collapse. He froze. "You said you were a waitress." She smiled faintly. "I read during breaks." Later that day, while setting the table, she folded the napkins in an intricate, perfect triangle. He watched her carefully. "You worked at a diner?" She gave a vague shrug. People leave behind skills. Sometimes I pick them up. It didn't make sense. Her movements were too polished, her posture too graceful. She could walk into the Met Gala and no one would question it. And then, one night, he woke to sounds down the hall. He followed them to find her standing in the middle of the hallway, eyes closed, murmuring in French. He reached for her gently. "Lena?" She flinched awake, disoriented. "You were sleepwalking." Her eyes widened, voice shaky. "Did I say anything?" He nodded. "You called someone Mama, then something about a garden? A gate?" She turned away quickly. "Just dreams." But Elijah couldn't forget it. The next morning, while she was in the shower, he typed Lena Carter into his secure search engine. Nothing. No background, no photos, no birth record. It was like she didn't exist. That afternoon, while she read by the window, he watched her silently. "You're not who you say you are," he said. She looked up slowly. "You're one to talk?" The standoff hung between them, two people with locked doors and hidden pasts. Then, just after sunset, a knock shattered the uneasy peace. 3 men in black suits stood at the door, emotionless. "Mr. Maddox," one said, "we're looking for someone. May we come in?" Elijah's jaw tightened. "Who are you?" "Private security, from abroad. We're tracking someone of interest, maybe using the name Lena Carter." He stared at them for a beat, then turned. "No one by that name here." Behind the bedroom door, Lena pressed a hand over her mouth. The men hesitated. "May we look around?" Elijah's eyes hardened. "Do I look like someone who lets strangers into his home? Try next door." They left, reluctantly. When the door closed, Lena came out, pale and shaking. "You lied for me," she whispered. Elijah leaned against the wall, exhaling. "What did you just drag me into?" She looked at him with tears burning in her eyes. "Something I've been running from since the day I was born." Elijah didn't speak for a long time. Lena stood in his living room, her arms crossed tight as if holding herself together. The soft hum of the city filled the silence between them. Somewhere far below, a horn blared. A siren wailed in the distance. Life outside moved on, but inside, time seemed suspended. He finally asked, "What exactly are they looking for? A fugitive? A thief?" She flinched. "A legacy?" He blinked. "Excuse me? They're not after me because of something I did. They're after me because of who I am." She looked away. "Or who they say I am." "Elaborate." She sighed and sank onto the couch, wrapping her arms around her knees like a frightened child. "I was born into a family I never asked for. Old money. European. Dangerous. My father died when I was a baby. My mother vanished shortly after. I was raised by staff. The people in suits? They're not security. They're messengers. And every few years they find me, try to drag me back. What? A name I don't want. A fortune I never asked for, and a marriage they arranged before I could speak." She looked at him, raw. "Would you go back to that?" Elijah said softly. Lena stared at him. "That's why I sleep in borrowed apartments, work under fake names. That's why I lie." His voice was gentle now. "So why come here?" She looked down. "I didn't mean to. The storm. I was running. I didn't expect kindness." He exhaled. "You weren't just running from the rain." Her voice cracked. "I was running from becoming someone I never wanted to be." The honesty in her voice struck something deep in him. "You know the feeling," he said, almost to himself. She glanced at him. "You disappeared too, didn't you? The world knew your name, Elijah Maddox, billionaire CEO. Then, nothing." He hesitated. "The company didn't matter after the accident, after I lost my brother. But I wasn't in the car that night. I should have been." Lena's eyes softened. "You carry it like a badge." He nodded. "I left, bought this penthouse, stopped being someone everyone expected me to be. I thought if I disappeared long enough, the guilt would—" "It doesn't," she whispered. He admitted. It doesn't. They sat in silence, two people whose lives had been shaped by storms they didn't choose. Finally, she stood. I should go. To where? He asked. Stay, he said, before he could think. Not forever, but until you figure things out? She turned to him slowly. Why? He didn't have a good answer. Maybe it was the way she challenged him. Maybe it was her honesty, her broken edges that matched his own. Or maybe it was because, for the first time in years, he didn't feel so alone. Because I trust you, he said quietly. Lena swallowed hard. Then I should be honest too. She walked to the kitchen, pulled a slip of paper from her bag, and placed it on the counter. It was an international birth certificate. The name wasn't Lena Carter. It was Helena Duval. Elijah recognized it instantly. An heiress. A missing one. He looked at her. You're hurt? Lena didn't answer. She just nodded. And in that moment, everything between them shifted. From strangers on the run to two lives tangled in secrets neither one could escape. But neither one wanted to walk away. Elijah stared at the name printed in elegant, gold-embossed letters. Seraphina Dubois. And not Lena Carter. Not the lost, mysterious girl he'd taken in during a storm. He looked up at her, still holding the paper. You lied. Spencer said. Seraphina, I believe you. Lena flinched but didn't back away. I had to. You told me your name was Lena. I needed to disappear, Elijah. I didn't think you'd help me if you knew. He paced, trying to make sense of it. Dubois? As in Dubois Maritain? She nodded slowly. My father was Jean-Marc Dubois. Elijah froze. That name, that empire, that scandal. Years ago, the Dubois Corporation nearly destroyed his family's holding company in a hostile takeover. His father had fought back, but it had cost them millions, nearly shattered their reputation. You're the daughter of the man who... She interrupted, her voice trembling. Who was murdered by his own brother. Elijah blinked. Your uncle? She nodded again. Henry. He wanted the company, and when my father refused to sign over controlling interest, he arranged a car crash. Only, it wasn't just my father in that car. Her voice cracked. I was there too. Elijah's stomach turned. You survived. She looked away. Barely. The car went off a bridge. I was pulled from the water 2 hours later by fishermen. My father didn't make it. The police ruled it an accident. But I know, he did it. Henry smiled at the funeral. She sat down, her arms hugging herself tightly. I ran, changed my name, crossed borders, learned to blend in, worked jobs no heiress ever should, all to stay hidden. Why are you here? I didn't mean to end up in your car. I wasn't planning anything. I was trying to get to a safe house in Boston, but then the rain hit. My leg was injured. I thought... She broke off, then looked up at him. You were kind, and I was tired of running. Elijah was still processing everything. The name, the legacy, the danger. We knew your family's name, he said. The Dubois tried to bleed us dry when I was 25. My father never recovered from the stress. And now, you're in my home. She met his eyes with quiet defiance. Then, I'll leave. Word came out faster than he expected. She blinked. What? He took a slow breath. You should have told me, but I understand why you didn't, and if what you're saying is true, you're not just hiding for yourself. You're trying to survive. She nodded. We need rules, he added. Rules? You don't get to lie again. You don't get to pull me into this without telling me what I'm walking into. And you don't get to disappear without warning. She bit her lip, then slowly reached into her bag. From a hidden zipper, she pulled out a small, worn leather keychain. An engraved silver tag hung from it, aged but polished. This was my father's, she whispered. He gave it to me the day before he died, said it was the one thing that mattered more than any company, the key to our old summer home. I haven't seen that house since I was a child. She placed it in Elijah's hand. In case I don't make it, you should have this. His fingers closed around the cool metal. I'm not going to let them find you, he said quietly. Her voice cracked. You don't understand. If they find me, you'll be next. I've been threatened before, he replied. I've fought men with more power than Henri Dubois. I'm not afraid of him. She looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. I'm afraid for you, she whispered. The room fell into a heavy silence as Seraphina's words lingered between them. Elijah looked down at the keychain in his hand, an object that seemed too small to carry the weight of an empire, a father's love, and a daughter's grief. Yet in that moment, it felt like a world. She stood across from him, her arms crossed tightly, but her eyes betrayed her, vulnerable, scared, desperate for someone to believe her. He slipped the keychain into his pocket. We'll figure this out, together. You really mean that? Her voice was tentative, like she didn't quite dare to hope. I do. But I need the truth, all of it. She hesitated, then nodded. Henry thinks I'm dead, but that won't last. If he even suspects I'm alive, he'll come for me. Not just to scare me. To finish what he started. Elijah's jaw tensed. Has he tried to contact you since the accident? Right. But strange things started happening a few weeks ago. Someone broke into my apartment. Took nothing, but they left the window wide open. I kept moving after that. The men who came to my door. Don't know who sent them, but they weren't just looking for a missing girl. They were professionals. Elijah sat down, his limp more noticeable now. She glanced at his leg, then asked softly, "What happened to your knee?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he poured himself a glass of water. You told me your story, let me tell you mine. She sat quietly. I was the golden boy once, in line to inherit Maddox Holdings. I built our international arm, negotiated deals across 5 continents. My father always said I had a head for business and a heart too soft. He took a sip, the water cold against his thoughts. Then came the Dubois expansion. Your uncle launched a surprise bid to buy out several of our satellite subsidiaries. It was brutal. We survived, but just barely. My father had a stroke 3 weeks after the board voted to cut half the staff. I blamed myself. Sorry, she whispered. He gave a half nod. Months later, I was overseeing a site visit at one of our construction properties in Chile. There was an equipment malfunction. A crane. I pushed one of my team out of the way, got crushed instead. She gasped. Lost the use of my right leg for almost a year. I walk now, but with pain. Some days I can't run. Some nights I can't sleep. I stepped away from the company after that. Quietly, sold most of my shares to avoid press. I've been behind the scenes ever since. Seraphina's throat tightened. You saved someone. I didn't do it to be noble, he said. I did it because I couldn't watch someone else be destroyed. I've seen enough of that. They sat in silence again, the hum of the city below filling the void. Are you helping me? She asked finally. Because I think you've been trying to protect yourself for so long, you forgot what it feels like to be protected. Her eyes shimmered. I have? I'm not here to fix your past, Seraphina, but I can help you face it, and if you want to reclaim your name, your life, then we do it on your terms. She looked at him like he was something she'd never believed in before. Safety, shelter, a place to land. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, he said. We're going to need a plan. She gave a tired smile. I've spent years running without one. For once, it feels good to stop. And as the night deepened around them, something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not yet, but trust. And in their world of betrayal and bloodlines, trust was the rarest gift of all. The ballroom shimmered like a dream carved out of glass and silk. Chandeliers sparkled above velvet-draped tables, while the city's elite floated across the dance floor in designer gowns and tuxedos. But none of them drew eyes like the woman on Elijah Maddox's arm. Seraphina, or Lena, as she'd insisted on being called in public, wore a fitted emerald gown that clung to her like moonlight on still water. Her hair swept to one side, lips touched with a soft rose. No crown, no diamonds, no introduction necessary. People simply stared, whispered, as if they sensed her story without knowing the word. Elijah, dressed in classic black with a subtle cane at his side, held her hand firmly. "You look like trouble," he muttered, guiding her through the crowd. She smiled without turning her head. "You said we needed bait." "It might be too much bait." They had arrived at the gala under aliases. Elijah using an old investment firm badge, Seraphina listed as his assistant. It was a calculated risk. But this wasn't just about appearances. It was about flushing out whoever might be tracking her movements. A whisper, a stare, a too long glance might reveal more than 1,000 questions ever could. An older gentleman near the champagne bar did a double take. Then again. Elijah noticed. He leaned into Seraphina's ear. "Left by the orchids." She didn't move her head. "He knows. Time to dance." He pulled her toward the ballroom center, right as the string quartet began a slow waltz. It was deliberate, dramatic, designed for people to be seen and to see. Elijah took her in his arms, his hand resting lightly at her waist, guiding her across the polished floor like a man who hadn't limped his way through recovery not long ago. "Trend we belong," he murmured. She raised an eyebrow. "I'm pretending I'm not terrified." "You're doing great." They moved in time with the music, every step precise, every breath calculated. She kept her gaze fixed on his collar, too afraid to scan the crowd again. "I shouldn't have come," she whispered. "He came because you're tired of hiding." He looked down at her, and for a moment the lights blurred around them, the noise dulled. It was just them, moving in rhythm, a heartbeat of safety inside a cage of danger. Then Elijah spotted the man again, this time on the phone. Too close to the service hallway. Too interested. "Time to go," Elijah muttered. They exited through the side corridor, moving quickly, trying not to run. Outside, the cool night wrapped around them, but as they crossed the courtyard, a shadow detached from the far wall. A security guard. At least that's what his uniform claimed. "Sir, excuse me," the man called. Elijah turned, stepping slightly in front of Seraphina. "Something wrong?" The man didn't answer. He lunged. Elijah shoved Seraphina behind him and swung his cane with surprising force. It cracked across the attacker's jaw, but the man recovered fast. A second strike met Elijah's side, sharp pain shooting through his ribs. Seraphina screamed. Elijah kicked the man backward and dragged her toward the waiting car. Tires screeched as the driver pulled away, heart pounding in Elijah's chest louder than the city outside. By the time they got back to the penthouse, his side was bleeding through his shirt. "You need a hospital," she said, pale. "Hospitals," he grunted. "No paper trail." She pulled him gently onto the couch, unbuttoning his shirt to reveal the bruise already forming. "You took a hit for me." He winced as she dabbed the wound. "You're making that sound like a surprise." Her fingers stilled. "I didn't tell you everything because I didn't think I could trust a man like you," she whispered. His jaw tightened. "And now?" She looked up at him, eyes raw. "Now I do." And for the first time since the stormy night they met, Elijah let her tend to the pain, both visible and buried deep beneath the skin. The room was silent after her confession, the low city hum from the windows, the only sound between them. Elijah watched her hands move, careful, focus bandaging his side with medical precision. Her touch was gentle, but her eyes held fire, grief, and something else he wasn't sure how to name yet. "You didn't have to risk yourself," she said softly, avoiding his gaze. "Not for me." "I didn't do it for you," he murmured. "I did it because I couldn't stand the idea of someone hurting you." She looked up, eyes meeting his, startled. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then her voice cracked, softer than before. "You should have left me in the rain that night." He shook his head. "And missed the chance to save a woman who doesn't want to be saved?" A tear slid down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away. "Liva," she whispered, "I've spent my entire life hiding, lying, running. I don't even know what's real anymore." He reached for her hand, ignoring the throb in his side. "I don't care who you used to be. I care about who you are when you look at me like that." She blinked. "Like what?" "Like I'm more than the man people whispered about in boardrooms. Like I matter." A silence stretched between them, charged and fragile. Seraphina nodded once. "You do." They sat that way for a while. She leaned her head on his shoulder, his arm wrapping around her gently, protectively. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in that penthouse of glass and memory. But when he woke the next morning, the quiet was too quiet. The guest room door was open. The couch cushions were still indented where they'd talked for hours. But she was gone. On the kitchen counter, a note sat folded beneath the keychain she had once handed him. Small, silver, engraved with the initials SF. He picked up the note with a trembling hand. "Elijah, thank you for seeing me. I couldn't bear the thought of them coming for you too. I'll finish what I started, alone. Don't look for me, please. Bina." He read it twice, then again. His fingers curled around the keychain, the cold metal biting into his palm. She was walking into danger, alone, again. He paced the room, fury burning beneath his ribs. After everything, she still thought she had to disappear to protect him. She thought her past was a curse he couldn't carry, but what she didn't realize was that Elijah Maddox had already lost everything once, and he wasn't going to do it again. He picked up his phone and made a call. "I need a name, now. Dubois, Paris, anything. She's in danger." The man on the other end hesitated. "You sure you want to reopen that door?" "I never closed it," Elijah said coldly. "And this time, I'm not walking away." Outside, the city continued to hum. Rain had stopped, but the storm was far from over. He stared out at the skyline, jaw set, heart hammering. Somewhere out there, Seraphina was alone. But not for long. He tucked the note inside his coat pocket, locked the keychain in his fist, and walked toward the door, determined to bring her back. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The rain had started again in Manhattan, but Elijah Maddox wasn't there to see it. He was halfway across the Atlantic, seated in the corner of a dimly lit Paris cafe, eyes trained on a piece of paper that had shaken him more than he'd admit. It was the second letter. Tucked inside the folds of a book Seraphina had left behind, he had found it the morning after she vanished. The handwriting was rushed, ink smudged where her hands must have trembled. "Don't come looking. Get Sienna. Did kill you too. But thank you for seeing me." He crumpled the note in his fist and stared at the cobblestone street outside. Paris felt colder than he remembered. Lonelier, too. His contact finally slid into the seat across from him. Slim, older, but sharp-eyed, Lucien, a former intelligence officer turned discreet fixer for the ultra-wealthy. "She's here," Lucien said quietly, "brought in by private security. Chateau Dubois, south of the city." "Was she willing?" Elijah asked. Lucien hesitated. "There are rumors. Sedatives, perhaps. Kept out of the public eye. The uncles told the press she's in recovery. Mental breakdown, he claims." Elijah's jaw tightened. "She's not unstable. She's terrified." Lucien nodded. "I believe you, but getting inside that estate? It's not a simple gate and lock. You're talking guards, cameras, a private medical wing. You sure this is worth it?" Elijah didn't blink. "She is." The sun dipped behind gray clouds as Lucien passed him a folded map and a key card. "This is all I can do. After this, you're on your own." Elijah didn't expect otherwise. By nightfall, he stood outside the chateau's outer wall, dressed in black, every step planned, every breath measured. The place was vast, melodious voices of hedges, winding gravel paths, high glass windows glowing softly from inside. Security was thick. He counted at least 6 guards from his vantage point, all with radios. But Lucien had marked a weakness. An older servant's entrance, long unused, leading through the wine cellar. He slipped in under cover of trees and fog, entered through a rusted side door, and crept silently down stone steps into the depths of the chateau. Wine bottles lined the walls. Dust clung to every surface. His flashlight caught glimmers of cobwebs, but no movement. Above him, the thump of footsteps echoed faintly. He followed the sound. The corridor led to a heavy oak door, locked from the outside. He listened. At first, nothing. Then, a faint, hoarse whisper from within. "Elijah?" His heart dropped. He pressed his palm flat against the door. "Seraphina? I'm here." A muffled sob broke through. "They told me you wouldn't come." "I told you I would." He worked quickly, bypassing the lock with a hairpin and shaking fingers. The door creaked open, and there she was. She was thinner, her skin pale, eyes glassy, rimmed with shadows, but she was alive. Her hands trembled as she reached for him. "They said I was sick, that I imagined everything. They made me take pills." He stepped into the room, wrapped his arms around her, and held her to his chest. "You're not sick. You're not crazy. They just wanted to silence you." "I thought I was losing my mind," she whispered. "You were losing your freedom. That's not the same." Her breath hitched. "Please don't let me disappear again." Elijah cradled her gently, voice like a vow. "Over my dead body." Elijah didn't wait. He lifted Seraphina into his arms, stunned at how light she'd become, how fragile she felt against his chest. Her head fell against his shoulder as if she hadn't slept without fear in weeks. They moved through the corridor silently, every step a stolen chance. The hallway leading to the garden exit was quiet. Too quiet. Elijah's pulse raced as he reached for the keycard Lucien had given him. The scanner blinked green. The door clicked open. But just as they stepped into the night air, a voice barked from behind them. "Stop." Two guards emerged from the shadows, flashlights cutting through the mist. Elijah didn't hesitate. He ducked low, shielding Seraphina with his body as he sprinted through the hedges. Shots cracked through the air, warning shots, he hoped. A break in the wall appeared ahead, the old gardener's path. He lunged through it, heart pounding, lungs burning. Lucien's car was exactly where he'd promised to hidden in the tree line, engine purring. The door flew open, and Elijah placed Seraphina in the back seat, diving in after her. Lucien floored the gas. Gravel sprayed behind them. The estate shrank in the rearview mirror. "Did they see your face?" Lucien asked breathlessly. "Don't care if they did," Elijah muttered. "They'll know what they did when she tells the truth." Seraphina was silent, curled in a ball beside him. Her hand clutched the keychain she had once given him, the same one he had worn around his wrist like a silent reminder. She pressed it into his hand now. "I thought I wouldn't see you again." His voice cracked. "I thought I lost you." Back in Manhattan, the penthouse had never felt so quiet, yet so alive. He placed her on the sofa, wrapped her in the softest blanket, and brought her warm tea. She sipped slowly, eyes finally starting to focus. "Elation," she whispered. "You risked everything. You are everything." Her lip trembled. "I don't know how to live in the world again. They made me believe I didn't belong anywhere." He sat beside her. "Then we start small. You're here. You're safe. And we'll find a way forward together." She looked down at her wrist, where faint bruises from restraints lingered. "I want to tell the truth. About my uncle, about the foundation money, about the murder. All of it." Elijah nodded. "We'll go public. I'll get you lawyers, journalists, investigators. We'll make noise so loud they won't be able to cover it up again." "They'll come after you," she said. He met her gaze. "Let them." Days passed. Seraphina began to recover, physically and emotionally. The bruises faded, her appetite returned, and her laughter slowly crept back into the apartment. One morning, she stepped onto the balcony as sunlight poured through the clouds. Elijah joined her with 2 mugs of coffee. She took his hand, eyes full of quiet strength. "You didn't just save me from them. You saved me from disappearing." He looked at her, truly looked, "And you reminded me what it feels like to care again." She smiled. "Then let's stop running. I'm ready to face them. He nodded. Together. And for the first time since she stumbled into his life in the rain, there was no fear in her voice, only fire. The world would soon know the truth, but for now, in this moment, with the city glowing beneath them and their hands entwined, they had each other. And that was the beginning of the fight neither of them would face alone. The car skidded onto a narrow dirt road, headlights slicing through the fog as thunder cracked overhead. Rain pelted the windshield like bullets, but Elijah didn't ease up on the gas. Beside him, Seraphina clutched the seatbelt with white knuckles, heart pounding as the estate's iron gates disappeared behind them. "We're not safe yet," Elijah muttered, eyes darting to the rearview mirror. "If they're tracking us—" "He will be," Seraphina interrupted. "My uncle never lets go of anything he thinks he owns." They reached a crossroads in the hills, then veered into an overgrown vineyard, abandoned but once part of the Dubois legacy. Elijah killed the engine and turned off the lights. They waited in silence as the rain soaked the world around them. Seraphina exhaled. "This place, I used to run through these vines as a girl." He looked over. "You're going to reclaim all of it, every stolen piece." Back in New York, Elijah wasted no time. He contacted a trusted cybersecurity expert, an old ally from his days as CEO. "I need everything you can find on Laurent Dubois. Offshore accounts, fraud, property transfers, hidden holdings. Burn it all into the light." "Understood," came the reply. "This won't be quiet." Seraphina, meanwhile, returned to the penthouse and opened the drawer where she had stored the silver locket, the one piece of her past she'd always carried but never opened completely. She pressed the hidden clasp at its side. A second compartment popped open. Inside was a thin, yellowed piece of folded parchment. She unfolded it slowly, hands trembling. It was her mother's will. Not a copy, an original, handwritten, dated 3 months before her death. And it was clear, her daughter, Seraphina Camille Dubois, was to inherit all direct family holdings upon her 25th birthday. There was no mention of Laurent. No loophole, no conditions. Her mother had never intended for her brother to control the fortune. Seraphina staggered backward, stunned. "She knew," she whispered. "She knew what he was capable of and tried to protect me." When Elijah returned hours later, she held out the paper with shaking fingers. He scanned it quickly, then met her eyes. "This changes everything." He made one call to a media network he once helped rescue from bankruptcy. "This is Elijah Maddox," he said. "I have a story, a big one, but it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to a woman the world tried to erase." They arranged a press conference for the next day. The penthouse became a war room. Lawyers, publicists, and investigators shuffled in and out. Elijah paced, coordinating every angle, while Seraphina stood by the window, staring out at the storm clouds beginning to break over Manhattan. "Are you ready for this?" he asked gently, stepping beside her. She turned to him with quiet certainty. "I've been running for so long, I forgot what it felt like to stand still." "Then let's make them listen." The next morning, the press conference was held in a grand ballroom downtown. Every major media outlet was present. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured. The Dubois scandal had already begun to swirl through rumor mills. But no one expected this. Elijah stepped to the podium first. He wore a charcoal suit, simple and sharp, but his expression was pure fire. Prime commitment. "Years ago, I lost everything because of a family with power and no conscience. Today, I stand with the one person that family couldn't silence." He stepped back. Seraphina approached. She wore a sleek, modest black dress, no diamonds, no makeup beyond a soft touch of rose on her lips. Her posture was upright, composed, but her eyes, they held storms. "Name," she began, "is Seraphina Dubois. I was born into a world of wealth and shadows. At age 24, I was told my father died in an accident, that my mother's will had been lost, that I was unstable. I was drugged, confined, and erased." Toward his half-smirk and curled firmly, understood fully. I'm here to tell you those were lies." She unfolded the document, her mother's will, and held it high for the cameras. "This was hidden from me, buried in my own locket, but it proves that my inheritance, my voice, and my future were stolen. Not because I was unfit, but because I was inconvenient." Her voice did not tremble. "We wanted me silent, but today, I choose to speak." Elijah watched her from the sidelines, his throat tight. She wasn't just surviving, she was commanding. A reporter stood. "Do you have proof your uncle was behind your father's death?" Seraphina didn't blink. "We're working with international investigators, but let me ask you, what kind of man locks his niece in a room and calls it protection?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Dude, there's a difference between power and legacy. My father built a legacy. My uncle only ever wanted power. Today, I began the process of taking it back." Afterward, as the press swarmed around them, Elijah gently took her hand and led her away. They stepped into a side hallway, breathless and flushed. She looked up at him. "Was I too much?" He shook his head. "You were unforgettable." Outside, headlines were already forming. Her eyes from shadows. Dubois legacy recreate. Olivia's looked terrible. But Seraphina didn't care for the headlines. She stood in the sunlit doorway of the conference hall, wind brushing her hair, and whispered to herself, "I'm not running anymore." Elijah placed his hand on her back. "No, you're walking through the front door now." She turned to him, eyes glistening. "Thank you. Not asking me to be anyone else." He smiled. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." And with that, the woman the world tried to erase stepped out, no longer in hiding, but into the spotlight she was born for. The offer came on a silver tray, quite literally. A polished manila envelope bearing the crest of Maddox Global Holdings was slid across the boardroom table, its contents promising Elijah full reinstatement as CEO. His name, his legacy, his empire, returned with a signature. He stared at the paper for a long time. They waited in silence, breath held, as if expecting him to leap at the chance. But Elijah gently pushed the envelope back. "Appreciate it," he said, voice calm, "but I've already found something better." He rose from the table, nodded once, and walked out. No speeches, no drama, just a quiet, resolute end to a chapter that no longer defined him. Back at the penthouse, Seraphina stood on the balcony, her scarf fluttering in the breeze. She turned as he approached, eyes questioning. He shrugged. "I turned it down." She blinked. "Your company?" He nodded. "It used to be my purpose, but now, I think I want to build something different." That evening, they sat side by side at the dining table, with blueprints and grant proposals spread between them. Their vision, a foundation for women who'd run from violence, secrets, or the edges of the world. They named it the Elena Project, in honor of the woman who'd once taken in Seraphina, hiding her under an assumed name and teaching her how to survive. Within weeks, the foundation took shape, quietly at first. A townhouse in the city, legal support, job training, a wing dedicated to women fleeing human trafficking and forced marriages. Seraphina poured her heart into it. Elijah handled the logistics. Together, they created a safe haven neither of them had ever truly known. Their mornings became sacred. They woke early, no alarms needed. He made the coffee strong and black. She curled up by the window with a book, sunlight spilling across her knees. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, just existed in the same silence, breathing in peace. And every Sunday, without fail, Elijah brought her roses. He never said why, never made it a grand gesture, just set them gently on the counter in a cut glass vase and kissed her forehead. She never asked. But every time, her eyes shimmered like he'd just given her the world. One gray afternoon, Seraphina took a cab alone to a cemetery just outside the city. A small grave marked with a brass plate sat beneath a willow tree. She knelt down, fingers trailing the inscription. Elena Carter, guardian, fighter, family. She laid a single white rose beside the marker and whispered, "You saved me. You gave me a second chance. I won't waste it." Back home, Elijah found her curled up on the sofa, still in her coat. He sat beside her, his hand finding hers. She leaned her head on his shoulder, heart aching with gratitude and love. That night, after dinner, he lit a few candles and turned off the lights. She raised an eyebrow. "What's the occasion?" He shrugged. "You exist. That's enough." They sat on the rug, legs tangled, sipping wine, and listening to soft jazz from the record player. The world faded. There was only them. And somewhere in the hush of night, as her head rested against his chest, Elijah spoke, softly. "I never believed in miracles," he murmured. "Not after what I lost. Not after what I became." She looked up. "Then you walked into the road that night," he said, brushing her cheek, "and everything changed." Her eyes welled up. "Then believe in one more," she whispered. He blinked. "What do you mean?" She placed his hand gently over her belly and smiled. For a moment, Elijah said nothing. He stared at her eyes, at the warmth of her smile, at the way her hand settled protectively over his. And then he exhaled again, who had been underwater for years and had finally broken the surface. "You're serious," he breathed. She nodded, tears beginning to fall. "We weren't trying, but we weren't not trying either." He laughed, a choked, stunned sound. "We?" She grinned. "You're stuck with me, Maddox." He pulled her into his arms, held her for a long time, then, voice thick with emotion, whispered, "I don't care what it takes. I'm going to be the father I never had." She pressed a kiss to his collarbone. "You already are." In the months that followed, their world shifted again. The foundation expanded. New donors came forward after Seraphina's speech went viral. She gave talks at women's shelters and gala fundraisers, always emphasizing one truth: survival was not weakness, it was strength in its purest form. She and Elijah worked tirelessly, but never forgot each other. They cooked together, read together, sat in the nursery late at night with blueprints and swatches of soft cream paint. She sang to her belly when she thought he wasn't listening. He was always listening. And every Sunday, Elijah still brought roses. Sometimes white, sometimes blush, once a deep red bouquet with tiny baby's breath tucked in. "Burning?" he said when she teased him about the arrangements. "This is my crash course in romance." By the 7th month, Seraphina glowed with a peace neither of them could have imagined at the start. One night, after a doctor's appointment, she curled into Elijah's lap on the patio. The city twinkled below them like scattered stars. "Terrified I wouldn't survive," she said quietly, "that I'd lose myself. But now, I feel like I'm finally who I was meant to be." He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "You didn't just survive. You changed the course of everything." She placed his hand back on her belly, where a soft kick fluttered beneath the surface. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. He nodded. "Better than okay." Later, as the lights dimmed and jazz played low in the background, Elijah leaned down and kissed her swollen belly. "I'll love you before I even meet you," he whispered to their unborn child. Then turned his gaze back to Seraphina. "I'll love you long after time forgets our names." She closed her eyes. And for the first time in a lifetime filled with secrets, shadows, and flight, she finally felt safe. Not because she was hidden, but because she was seen, loved, and blooming, just like the roses he never stopped bringing her. The courthouse was nothing like the grand venues Seraphina had once imagined as a little girl. No marble columns, no orchestra, no press, no designer gown, just a quiet room with white walls, a judge in a crisp black robe, and two souls who had already weathered every storm they were ever meant to survive. Seraphina stood in a simple cream dress. Her hair fell in soft waves down her back, a silver pin tucked above her ear. Elijah wore a navy suit, clean, classic, with a single white rose tucked into the lapel. They didn't exchange rings with fanfare. There was no crowd to cheer, no champagne to pour, but when they looked at each other, the rest of the world blurred into silence. The judge invited them to speak their vows. Seraphina turned to Elijah, her voice steady, heart full. "You rescued me from more than danger," she said. "You rescued me from who I thought I had to be. I spent so long running, hiding, pretending, but with you, I learned that my name, my past, my scars, they don't define me. You gave me space to become who I truly am." She paused, eyes glistening. "You saw me when I couldn't see myself, and now I vow to stand beside you, not as someone to be protected, but as your partner in every storm." Elijah took her hands gently. "He spent my whole life building walls. I thought power would keep me safe. I thought distance was strength. But then you appeared, soaked in rain, full of secrets, and more honest than anyone I'd ever met." He smiled faintly. "You showed me that broken people can build something beautiful, that wounds can be gardens, that fear can lead to something more, if we let it." He exhaled. "I vow to never stop choosing you, through quiet mornings, messy days, and every chapter we have yet to write." The judge nodded, her tone warm. "You may sign." Seraphina reached for the pen. For the briefest moment, her hand trembled. Then she wrote it out, stroke by deliberate stroke. Seraphina Dubois Maddox. Her old name, her new name, her truth? When she handed Elijah the certificate, he ran his fingers across the ink like it was something sacred. Later, as they stepped outside, the city greeted them with a golden hush. The streets were damp from a morning shower, and the sun peeked between clouds like a quiet blessing. They didn't hail a limo. No paparazzi waited. Instead, they walked down the sidewalk, hand in hand, past the buildings that had once held their secrets and fears. When they reached the corner of 7th and Waverly, Seraphina paused. Elijah followed her gaze. It was the hotel. The one where he'd first taken her in. Where her red dress had left puddles on the marble floor. Where she'd told him her name was Lena, and where he hadn't yet realized his world was about to be rewritten. By the glass doors, a young maid stood pushing a cart, her eyes tired, her frame small in the uniform. Seraphina stepped away from Elijah and approached the girl. She slipped a folded bill into the tip jar, but also something else. A pale ivory card printed with gold foil. The Elena Project. Seraphina D. Maddox, director. The girl looked up, startled. Seraphina met her eyes with a gentle smile. "If you ever need a way out," she said softly, "call me." The girl nodded, emotion flickering behind her lashes. Seraphina stepped back beside Elijah. And as they walked on, she didn't look back. Their hands found each other again as they strolled down the avenue, the soft rhythm of their steps syncing like the beating of two long-sept hearts, finally at rest. "I think that's the first time I've walked past that place without flinching," Seraphina murmured. Elijah glanced at her. "Because it's no longer where you started, it's just where the story turned." She smiled. "We're not running anymore," he said quietly. "We're home." The word hung in the air. Home. Not a place, not a penthouse or a country estate, but a feeling. A presence, a peace. And for the first time, they both truly believed it. That night, they returned to the townhouse they had filled with soft furniture, blooming plants, and the smell of roasted coffee beans. The nursery was half finished, still missing curtains and a bookshelf, but that didn't matter. They curled up on the couch, wrapped in the same blanket they'd once used in the early days when nothing felt certain. The fireplace crackled. The rain began again outside, but this time, it brought no fear. As she dozed against his shoulder, Seraphina whispered, "Do you think they're still looking for me?" He ran a hand through her hair. "Let them. They'll never find you now." Because the girl they're looking for doesn't exist anymore. She smiled against his chest. "Her better this way," she murmured. In the months that followed, they built not just a life, but a legacy. The Elena Project expanded, drawing in women from across the country. Journalists asked for interviews. Investors offered to fund branches in other cities, but Seraphina never chased the spotlight. Instead, she poured her energy into the details: the quiet work, late-night planning sessions, personal phone calls to women in shelters, handwritten notes left on the pillowcases of every woman who stayed at the townhouse. "You are not alone. You are not broken. Love, Seraphina." She chose the name Maddox for their baby's middle name. Elijah cried when she told him. "Wanted him, or her, to know," she said, "that they came from something strong, something healed." He whispered, "So did I." On their first anniversary, they visited the vineyard outside Paris, not to relive the escape, but to reclaim the memory. They brought roses, 3 of them, and for the girl she used to be, and for the man who found her, and one for the life they were now creating. At sunset, they stood on the hill, wind catching the hem of her white dress. "More shadows," Seraphina said. "To your hiding," Elijah replied. They kissed under the soft fall of twilight, a quiet promise between them, unspoken, but understood. And as they turned back toward the path, toward their future, Seraphina touched the chain around her neck, no longer a locket of secrets, but a simple charm bearing one name. Her name. The one she chose. The one she earned. Seraphina Dubois Maddox.